Well, hey friends, welcome back to another pottery template tutorial. So today we are making a long requested project. This is the butter bell. Another name for it is a French butter dish. So the first thing you need to do is tape your two template pieces together. So B1 and B2 both have two little indicators that say attached here. You want to attach them at that point. We're going to roll out a 1/2 centimeter slab. And with this 1/2 centimeter slab, you want to cut out each template piece once. I actually just ran out of room for B4 on here, so I'm gonna just roll out one additional slab for that. So you see here, I'm using the scraps to make another 1/2 centimeter slab for B4. Set those aside, and now I'm going to roll out a 1 centimeter slab. This is going to be the lid, and I personally like to make the lid a little bit thicker. That's why I'm making it 1 centimeter here. Making it thicker is not completely required, but I personally like it. And then I'm going to go ahead and put these pieces in front of the fan. So if you don't have a fan, you do want to let them dry out for about an hour, but with a fan, I can reduce that to about 15 minutes. So you see that there are 3 diagonal pieces here. These are all going to be assembled into cylinders, and they're all done the exact same way. The smallest one is going to be the handle, the medium one is going to be the lid, and the largest one is going to be the base. So I like to cut my edges at a 45-degree angle so that they overlap. We're going to start by assembling the lid. So you want to take the middle cylinder and then score, and if you need to, you can add a little bit of slip or water, or just stick them together at that point. So you want to take the middle cylinder, which is B2, and position it in the middle of the 1 centimeter B4 piece. So the thicker circle piece. Position it there, mark it, score, and attach these two pieces together. Do your best to make sure this piece is as round as possible. For all of these steps, the more perfectly round you can make it, the better it will fit into the base later on. The next step is we need to trim the lid to size. So I'm using the larger of the cylinders. This is actually the base. And before I connect the base, I'm going to use that to position it so it's perfectly spaced around the inner cylinder, mark it, and cut it to size. This is going to guarantee that the inner cylinder and the outer cylinder are evenly spaced. Okay, now you can remove the larger cylinder, the base, and we're going to actually attach it now to make the bottom of our butter bell. So I'm positioning it as round as possible on the last round piece and attaching these pieces together. Once they're attached, I can go ahead and trim the excess and blend it together. If you're finding that the middle of the lid is sagging a little bit, that can be that your clay is not quite dry enough. My clay was a little bit wet to attach the handle here, so I wanted to support it. So I found a small pot that was about the right width to support the center of the lid as I attach the handle. You want to be careful if you're experiencing any sagging here, because by pushing the handle into the pot at this point, you can just like cave in the lid and distort it quite severely. So that's why I'm putting it on a pot here. And I recommend that because that really helped to support the lid from caving in. And now, while the piece is still quite wet, I'm going to start bending the handle outward. I really recommend doing this because not only does it add a really nice curved element to it, but also it's going to create a more stable base for when you're using the butter bell. So don't forget, you're often going to be turning the lid over and you want it to rest securely while you're scooping out the butter. Now, before I finish refining these pieces, I like to let my pottery dry to leather hard. So I'm just going to let it dry overnight under some cloth. Now that my pieces are leather hard, I can go ahead and refine the edges. So I'm going to use my fingers and a sponge, maybe a rib, to just make sure all the edges are nice and cleaned up. There's no sharp points. Everything is nice and clean and tidy. And then you can just set them aside to dry until they're ready to go into the kiln. For the bisque kiln, I do recommend firing them together. This is going to help them to not warp away from each other, but rather, if they do warp, warp together. Then I'll just pop them in the glaze and put them back into the fire. So for the glaze fire, I do recommend actually firing them separate at this point, and this has to do entirely with how you're going to wipe it. So for this one, I want to wipe just the bottom of the base and the part that touches the bottom of the lid. So just that little ring, I'm going to remove the glaze from, and then I'm going to fire them separately. If you want to fire them together, you can do this, but you're going to have to remove not only the bottom of the base, but also whatever parts of the butter balls that are touching each other, because otherwise the glaze will fuse, right? So the easiest is to just fire them separately. And that's it. Here's our butter ball. This is so cute. I'm so glad that I finally got around to making this project. This one's a little complicated to design because it does have these two pieces that are fitting together, but I really recommend for this just making sure your circles are as round as they possibly can be. That's going to make it as easy as possible. I also recommend letting your butter come to room temperature before putting it in here. I didn't do that and I really struggled to get the butter in. And then how a butter bell works is you just put a little bit of water into the base, and that stops any oxygen from coming in contact with your butter, and it's going to help your butter stay fresh for a long time. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, friends.